So let's get started. Let's start with session 1, Antimicrobial Therapeutics Landscape. And it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator of session 1, Dr. Rafael Canton, head of the Clinical Microbiology Department at the University Hospital Ramón y Cajal from Madrid, Spain, also a member of the JPIAMR Scientific Advisory Board and of the Workshop Scientific Steering Committee. Rafael, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, and thank you very much, for invite me to participate in this workshop. I also thanks to the UK Medical Research Council and also to the GPI to organize this meeting. And my role here is going to be as a moderator. I am clinical microbiologist working in a hospital in Madrid, Spain. I have participated in different research projects on antimicrobial resistance, and I also belong to the UCAS committee, the European Committee on Antimicrobial Susceptibility Testing. We have a speaker who is Ursula Zurbacher, and also we have a panelist. The idea is just to discuss and to present which are the antimicrobial resistant therapeutic landscape. We have a first speaker from Ursula, and then we will have a panelist that will have the opportunity to briefly present their idea, and also together at the end of the presentation of Ursula and also the panelists, we will have the opportunity to discuss on the presentation and also the opinions for the different panelists. So Ursula, when you want, you can start. Just to say that Ursula is a very well-known person in the antimicrobial resistance. He is an independent expert on these antibacterial drugs. He has published several papers on the PIP line and also on the PKPD. She is a frequent assistant of Congress, and we are very glad that you joined to us to present your thoughts. So thank you very much, Ursula. When you want to start, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Rafael, for this nice introduction and for inviting me to this workshop. I will give you a very short overview of available and potentially future antibiotics to start discussions here. So the problem of extensively and also pan-drug resistant bacteria has not changed. It's still present, and you all know the WHO critical priority pathogens list. It's still valid. In the last about 3 to 4 years, several new antibiotics that are based on long-known classes have been approved. What they do is they help to alleviate resistance due to specific resistance mechanisms. These resistance mechanisms are not distributed evenly among bacteria and also have a broad range of geographical variation, as you can see here in this graph. It shows the example of enterobacteria with a worldwide average rate of carbapenem resistance below 2%. The main resistance mechanism in this bacteria is the production of beta-lactamases, with, again, a wide variation of distribution in different parts of the world. Most new beta-lactamase inhibitor combinations, and the ones that are still in clinical development, work against serine beta-lactamases. These are the green bars here in this graph. And they are not working against metallo-beta-lactamases or other resistance mechanisms in red and in yellow here. As you can see in this graph, in the Asia-Pacific region, these new antibiotics would not be very helpful. We have a very similar situation in Europe, where there's also a high geographical variation. As examples, I would just like to point out Italy, with mainly KPC, these are serine beta-lactamases, the blue bars, and Greece, with also a prevalence of metallo-beta-lactamases in yellow. So this example of beta-lactamase inhibitors shows that the concept of modified old classes with improvement against specific resistance mechanisms may only be a temporary, locally helpful concept, but not a global response to resistance. This is not only true for the beta-lactam antibiotics, but also for other classes of antibiotics. The current clinical pipeline reflects this continued approach of addressing single resistance mechanisms by modifying old classes. I selected here just the relevant drugs, so it's not a complete pipeline. New beta-lactamase inhibitor combinations and other old classes are still dominating the field. We have two, and that's the good news. We have two new antibiotics against Staphylococcus aureus with new targets, and also two new antibiotics. These are topoisomerase 2 inhibitors with a focus on gonorrhea. So let's look at the non-traditional pipeline. You can see two major fields here. These are the antibodies with a focus on prevention, and the microbiome modulating therapeutics, which are targeted as Clostridium difficile. With the exception of phages and their products, the endolysins, all the other approaches are acting indirectly. And that means that they will be used as adjunctive therapies and still need active antibiotics. So without new active antibiotics, without resistance, most adjuvants may not be so helpful or solve the resistance situation. So a short summary of the clinical pipeline. We can see as a trend towards pathogen-specific, what's often called precision therapy. This is based on the assumption that we will have highly developed healthcare systems in high-income countries. They need diagnostics and other good healthcare infrastructure. The patient recruitment for clinical trials will be quite difficult. So for the traditional, so-called traditional therapies, they will patch the resistance problems with geographic differences, with different impact. So not a solution for all areas, but geographic differences. We have mainly old antibiotic classes, many beta-lactam antibiotics in combination with beta-lactamase inhibitors, but also new classes, as I said already. For the non-traditional approaches, these are mostly pathogen-specific and indirect acting. So mostly will be used as adjuvants or for prevention. And it will be rather difficult to show clinically a benefit for patients. And I'm sure that will be discussed later during this workshop. So what can we expect in the future? To to have a feeling for that, we have to look at the preclinical pipeline. In contrast to the clinical pipeline, we have a very wide range of scientific concepts. We have traditional and we have non-traditional approaches, so very wide. It's characterized by a wide range of targets, if you're talking about the traditional approaches. That includes membrane targets. That's specifically interesting because it circumvents some scientific problems of penetration of the outer cell wall. And we have other well-described targets, such as the cell wall or protein synthesis. What you can notice is an increasing number of antivirulence and adjunctive approaches. And again, they need very well-equipped healthcare systems. So looking at trends, it's very difficult to talk about trends in preclinical pipelines because you never know what will make it to the clinical stage. But what I notice is the trend towards technically challenging and scientifically interesting approaches. What I often hear is that universities are expected to fulfill the roles of pharma companies, which of course will not be possible. We have long timelines of this discovery and very early stages due to financial restraints and also due to several other gaps, including knowledge gaps. I think what is very important, especially here in this workshop, is grants and funding really shape the drug discovery focus. So it's very important what JPIAMR and other funders are doing and what their focus is. So what are the hurdles for antibiotic drug discovery? This is the future for us, and drug discovery is really the most important thing here. So you can see the R&D pathway that in reality, of course, is not linear as it is shown here. Modified classes, modified compounds of old classes start later in this pathway than completely new concepts and new classes. So this very early drug discovery is very often taking place in academic institutions. Of course, we have also SMEs who are doing that, but it's mainly taking place in universities, where the well-known scientific challenges are addressed. A main hurdle here is the translation from finding and characterizing a hit and identifying the mode of action to the lead station. So getting a lead structure and then especially the lead optimization. These steps require more and different resources like animal studies, extended medicinal chemistry resources, or PK and PD strategies. And universities are very often struggling with these requirements. So we should really be aware of what can be done at universities and what not, and where the so-called, sometimes so-called value of death is. It's often much earlier than we assume. So to end with this overview and give you an outlook, Not surprising, resistance is not disappearing. It will be with us for a long time and probably forever. We need urgently innovation. And if we want to address the global resistance problems, we also need to focus on direct acting antibacterial therapies. I don't say we don't need anything else, but without the cornerstone of antibacterial therapy, we will get into problems. The hotspots of innovation are universities. Universities have a lot of challenges, as I said already. They have academic goals, and these are not necessarily in line with drug discovery goals, or then even later in general R&D goals. The R&D expertise, so the entire chain of what is necessary to do, is mostly missing. There's insufficient R&D support and insufficient resources to do all that what is required for R&D. And then there is no funding that allows sustainable structures. So it's applying for funding for every single study. And of course, that's difficult if you want to progress your drug discovery program. So funding is important, and I think both is very important. It's the basic research that does not have a focus on specific drug in the end. So we need basic research, and we need the funding for the basic research, but we also need targeted drug discovery funding if we want to get a drug in the end. So I think we should really look at these both pathways of funding, the targeted one and the general basic research funding. So this was a very rough overview, and I'm sure that there's a lot to discuss and a lot more to say. And I'm really looking forward to the next hours of this workshop. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Ursula, for your presentation and with your overview of the antimicrobial resistant therapeutic landscape. I think for a matter of time, we are going now to the participants, to the panelists. They will perform a very brief presentation of themselves, and also they will present in no more than 5 minutes of their opinion on the situation. And later we will have together a general discussion, trying also to answer the question for the assistant. So the first one is Hatim Sati. He is representing the WHO antimicrobial resistance. So Sati, you can start. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Canton. Thank you, Dr. Canton, and thank you, JPIAMR and the UK MRC for the kind invitation. This is really a pleasure for me to represent my team at the WHO Global Initiative and Research Coordination Unit. Our unit sits at the WHO AMR Global Coordination and Partnership Department. And our work is mostly focused on the area of R&D based on the mandate provided in the 5th strategic action line of the WHO Global AMR Action Plan, which calls for the development of the economic case to increase sustainable investment in R&D. These are some of the work areas and activities that our unit is covering under the objective 5 of the Global Action Plan, including priority setting and coordination, fostering R&D, as well as promoting equitable access to quality antibacterials, those existing and new. So touching on some of the main pillars that Mark has highlighted at the very beginning. And I'm going to highlight some of these activities, and starting with the pipeline analysis. And in fact, as Mark mentioned, this workshop is very timely in that we have just launched the 2020 pipeline report. It's the annual WHO report on antibacterial agents in clinical and preclinical pipeline. The report this year, for the first time, in addition to the traditional antibacterials in clinical and preclinical development, examined also non-traditional agents and in clinical and preclinical development. And this is the first time we do this analysis. The analysis also included vaccines in preclinical development. The report, for those who don't know, is also complemented with open access to all data through our interactive dashboard, which is published in the WHO Observatory website. And a lot of the conclusions that Ursula has made are in line with most of our findings. I think Ursula provided a wonderful overview of the pipeline. And this, if there's one takeaway message, is that the overall clinical pipeline and the recently approved, 11 recently approved antibiotics are insufficient to tackle the challenge of increasing emergence and spread of AMR for the reasons, or some of the reasons that Ursula highlighted, including the lack of truly novel, in the original sense, of antibacterials. In addition, we are currently working towards the finalization of the first report and analysis of antibacterial vaccines in clinical development. This project is done in collaboration with the Immunization, Vaccines, and Biological Department at the WHO. And again, it will be complemented by open access to all the data. It's a very thorough exercise, and we are excited about it, and it's scheduled for launch, the report and the analysis, at the end of the summer. The last activity I'd like to highlight is the development of the first WHO fungal priority pathogens list. This is, of course, in response to the emergence of antifungal resistance to the limited number of classes of antifungal medicines, which represents a rising global public health threat. We have been working towards expanding our work in the area of antifungal R&D and to address antifungal resistance. And we think that this is a very good start that could very well stimulate the discussion around this topic. And the objective of this priority pathogens list is to define related R&D priorities in order to align and inform R&D investments and to identify the identified public health needs. But we are also hoping to use or utilize this list to analyze and monitor antifungal and therapeutics and diagnostics in clinical development, as we do with the antibacterials on an annual basis. With that, I conclude, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Hatim, for the presentation and your thoughts. And we have now Stefano Messori. He is working in the World Organization for Animal Health, and he has been working on antimicrobial resistant projects in the veterinary field. as a One Health approach. So, Stefano?
Thanks a lot, Rafael. I'm trying to start my video. Okay, I can now. Thanks a lot, Rafael. Thanks a lot to UKRI and JPIAMR for inviting me to participate in this meeting. It is my pleasure to be here representing the OIE and actually being the only one representing the animal health sector. I hope you can see my slides. I'm just trying to start a slide sharing. Okay, I hope you can all see my presentation now.
That's fine.
Okay, so it is a pleasure to be here. I reckon it is a bit of a challenge to be the only speaker on animal health. I'll try to provide you in these 5 minutes a flavor, to give you a flavor of what the challenges are for developing new therapeutics in the animal health sector. I know my talk will be a little bit different than the other ones, as challenges in the animal health sector are different to the one that we have on the human health one. Just a very brief introduction about what the World Organization for Animal Health, or OIE, is. We are a very old international organization. We've been established in 1924. Our main mandate is improving animal health, welfare, and veterinary public health. And we are the body setting standards recognized by World Trade Organization for what concern animal health and animal welfare. We do have a lot of members, 182. For each one of our member countries, we do have a national delegate which represents each organization at the OIE, and we have national focal points that are experts on specific subject matters, and one of them covers specifically veterinary products and includes AMR. We are based in Paris, and we have regional and sub-regional representation all around the globe. So what are the main activities that relate to AMR at the OIE? Not all of them are relevant to the specific session of this meeting, but I believe it would be important for you to have an overview of what we do, as many of you might not know what we actually do. The OIE is mainly a standard setting body. We do standards related to animal health and animal welfare for both terrestrial and aquatic animals. Some of these standards specifically address AMR and related issues. Specifically, there are standards on surveillance, monitoring of antimicrobial use, responsible and prudent use, and risk analysis. We do also work on the monitoring of antimicrobial use. We started in 2016 to investigate in all of our member countries about the use of different antimicrobials in animals and different species. And we start for this year with the 5th report that has just been published. We started doing some comparison of some trends in the use and some improvement actually in the use of antimicrobials across our membership. Oops, sorry, I have a problem with my mouse. Apart from this, we participate in tripartite activities to support member countries with the National Action Plan, with tracks, and we do provide other guidance to the members. One of them, for example, is providing a list of veterinary important antimicrobials, which is kind of a similar list to what the WHO has for critical important antimicrobials, but seen from a veterinary perspective. So which are the antimicrobials that we still need to take care of the health of our animals? And then, of course, we are involved in R&D coordination. We have had a few expert groups that aim to identify main vaccines that could help reducing the use of antimicrobials in animals. And through the Therapeutics ISC, which is an international research consortium of research funders from all around the globe, we are addressing the main topics related to how to advance the therapeutic pipeline in the animal health arena. Just a few words about what the Therapeutics ISC is. As I said, it's a group of research funders, both public and private, and international donors. This group agreed to have a minimal level of investment on animal health over a 5-year period, and agreed on delivering common targets and coordinating and aligning fundings to delivering these targets. This Therapeutics ISC ask expert groups to identify main research gaps on some selected priorities, and on these selected priorities, it commits to launch specific research projects to cover research gaps and advance knowledge in these areas. One of the areas that has been recognized as a priority for the Stridus ISC is alternative to antibiotics. As I said, the topic for animal health is a bit different from what it is for human health. We are not trying to developing new antibiotics, because we believe that most of the newly developed antibiotics will be used for animal health, for human health. For animal health, the main areas we are interested in are alternative to antibiotics that could act directly on the pathogen, and we are specifically looking into phages research, agents or compounds that could enhance the resistance of the host to disease, and we're looking into immunomodulators. We're then looking to try to understand what is the mode of action of antibiotics as growth promoters, to be able to mimic this effect with other molecules, then being able to reduce the use of growth promoters around the globe. And then we look into microbiome and to see how this could help in maintaining animal health without using antimicrobials. At this point in time, we have started in identifying research gaps on all of these 4 areas. We are defining research roadmap with the help of the expert that would help us in filling in the identified gaps. Once this research roadmap will be ready, they will be delivered to our funders in the Stridus ISC consortium that will then issue specific research projects to fill in these research gaps, and then develop new molecules or new products that could help improving therapeutics on the animal health side. And with that, I hope I provided you a decent overview of what we do and what the main challenges and targets are for the animal health area. Over.
So thank you very much, Stefano. We will have the opportunity to answer questions at the end. I remember to the attendants that they can send their questions through the chat, and we will read for them at the end and discuss. And now we have the opportunity to hear Alexandra Martini. Alexandra Martini came from the European Commission, and she has been working previously in HIV, but now on the policies on antimicrobial resistance. So Alexandra, your time.
Okay, thank you, Raffaele. Thank you to the organizers as well. And Jessica, thank you as well for sliding show my presentation. So yes, from challenge to challenge, I will in these few minutes give you a brief overview of what we are doing and what we are planning to do in the Commission, but in cooperation with other organizations as well, in the field of antimicrobial resistance and therapeutics included. Next slide, please. So here, just to explain to those that don't know us in the audience, the European Commission, what is our role? So we are actually a policy-making organization where we develop policies on different areas, including research, in agreement with the member states, so with the European Council and the European Parliament. And we are also responsible in the implementation of these policies. This path has changed as from 1st of April, as a new agency has been established for the implementation, but the policy remains within our organization. And as you see in the previous research funding program, which just ended, we had several objectives in the infectious diseases, which are quite relevant on the IMR field, and also the different challenges that we have seen presented briefly at the beginning by Ursula, but have been also presented by the WHO, and I'm sure they will be subject to discussions on this workshop and so on the following days. So the combating the antimicrobial resistance and developing a pipeline and countermeasures for tackling the problem of IMR, but also of the other pathogens that are on the priority list is of ultimate importance for us, and that is to be done in in a global environment. So endorsement of the collaboration with international partners has also been key element in our policies, and the approach towards the One Health. So I'm very happy to have actually Stefan on the board. Thanks, Jessica. So this is the base. In 2017, we launched a second, so this is not a new, but it's a second action plan against the rise of antimicrobial resistance, and which was built on 3 different pillars, of which at the center to be able to make best practice policies and to be able to shape the global agenda research R&I is key for not only the development of products, so the development really of new solutions on the growing problem of resistance to antibiotics and other antimicrobials, but it is also important in the development of also novel mechanisms to address challenges that we all face, and the sustainability elements as well, which is a main issue. So this is our base, and the reason I'm introducing it to is because this is also our reference point, together with other action plan which are developed at the national scale, at the national level, but also international, like the WHO, to shape what are our directions and what are our instruments on the make. So for Horizon 2020, next, please, we have been doing now a lot of activity or supporting different activities with different instruments, because the issue is complex, so the complexity of the elements around to tackle it. Very important is that we have been supporting indeed the JPIAMR through the collaborative project. So we had in place coordination and support actions, as well as ERANET instruments, so the ERANET co-fund instruments, to be able to use European funds and European support towards the, activities and calls that are done at the member states level as a collaboration with the European members. In doing so, we also have been taking care of supporting, continuing to support through the ERC more upstream research. So really innovation and innovative ideas that are coming from the academia, in particular through the ERC, but also coming from the private sector through SMEs and spin-offs. And in this context, the SME instrument and the Innofin instrument, so where the investment bank also with the backup of our of the European Commission and our program provides support to highly risky research and innovation, has been also utilized in the IMR field, as well as the Innovative Medicines Initiative, IMI, which is a partnership with between the private and the public funders and organizations to advance development of new products. And the focus on IMI has been more on the late preclinical, let's say, late preclinical, sorry, to the clinical. So it's really more on the phases on the clinical evaluation on the different concepts. And for the next slide, now we are in the changing mechanism. So as different challenges have been presented, I present you the challenges and the opportunities also that we are facing at the moment in developing new instruments and in the developing of the make of the program, which is not a process that has finalized, but I give you an overview on the different elements and the ideas that are on the discussion tables for addressing different aspects. Here is just to give you a snapshot of Horizon Europe, which has been launched recently, for which some programs are on the make and we are in the dialogue with the member states, but basically is producing, let's say, is building up of the existing mechanism we had already, Horizon 2020, for supporting of the basic research and not only the infrastructure that are in place and new ones, on demand of the needs that are identified in consultation with at large with the community, but also the addressing the challenges, global challenges as we speak, and you see the different clusters in the pillar 2, where we have the health cluster, but not only the food and natural resources, climate, energy, and mobility, which are quite relevant for us because we are really talking about the one health approach, so the human health, animal health, and environmental health, as we all agree here on this table. And then the pillar 3, which has more innovative instruments that are on the make, especially with the European Innovation Council, is really to address the market needs, really to support and be enabled. So the development of these instruments is to support SMEs, but not only SMEs, all the organizations that are facing challenges and problematics in the development and inputting on the market the products which are on pipelines. And for the next one, so for the Horizon Europe, we have just launched, for the sake of time, I don't go into detail, but just I wanted to highlight, we have just recently published the strategic plan, which covers the first 4 years, and it gives you really an orientation on what has been identified as areas where we can really make a difference on it has to be a support with the Horizon Europe program on the partnerships, on the missions which have been identified and the areas for international cooperation. And if we go to the next slide, just a snapshot on one of the elements of this strategic program, indeed, antimicrobial resistance has continued, because it's not novelty, but it has been continued to be identified as an important element where we have to tackle the challenges and the gaps that are currently available, and the workshop will be very interesting for us as funders to see exactly what is available, what is on the make, what are really the gap and needs, where we need to intervene, and where the instruments can be at best place to, let's say, to respond as well and support. And here, so with the last one, here, these are our plans which are quite in some cases advanced, and for which and other plans which are still more on the brainstorming. So basically important to know is that we are indeed now in the process to launch very soon a work program for the next 2 years. So the work program for 21-22, which we are expecting to launch officially in a few weeks' time, so early May, hopefully by early May, and where we would like to indeed call for coordination activities, so to the member states or the different authorities present at the member states level, to work on the preparation together with us and with other stakeholders and players on different partnerships that can be then developed further later in the coming years of Horizon Europe. One important one is on the European partnership on the One Health IMR. And but linked to that, and quite relevant as well, it would be the European partnership for the animal health and the welfare, the biodiversity and health within the One Health context are also important partnership. And also we are discussing with our member states the preparation and the ideas and the concept behind also a European partnership on the preparedness to pandemics. In addition to that, we have also would like to address the problems of the pool incentives and exactly the gaps that also Ursula has presented at the beginning in the pipeline, and what can we do, in fact, to pool and to advance so to address the market needs, but also to address the difficulties that there are in the financial investments. And so we are calling for development of a procurement for new antimicrobials. And the InvestEU will be another pillar on the investment, more focusing on the market environment, where a large percentage of some instruments has been envisaged to be utilized for SMEs developing solutions. And of course, we will continue in the cluster 1 to support collaborative research, as we are doing, for example, on activities which are linked to the JPIAMR JPI, and the joint undertakings, which are at the moment existing, will end very soon. And we are also in the discussion and the preparation of what is called the DCTP 3, so the European Union Africa Global Health Partnership, but also the Innovative Health Initiative, which is on the make and which at the moment we are discussing at the council level. So this is quite of a draft with, as I said, some elements, and hopefully all these different instruments which at the moment in the preparation will be utilized, and in the dialogue and in the collaboration with member states and with the key players that are performing the work on the research and in the coordination, will address the problem of One Health JPIAMR.
Well, thank you very much, Alexandra, for the presentation of the opportunities and also for the action for the European Commission. And now we have another speaker, who is Tim Jenkins, who is the head of the Wellcome Trust Drug-Resistant Infection Priority Program. So, Tim, you have now your time.
Raphael, thank you very much. And thank you to the organizers and JPIAMR for the invitation to speak today. Now, for Wellcome, what we want to see is a world where no one anywhere is endangered by drug-resistant infections. This is something that we think is achievable, that it's going to require quite a lot of work and interventions across a number of areas and over a long period of time. Right now, we're focused on a couple of goals. One of those is we want to foster mobilization of government-led action in this space. Governments need to do more across a number of areas, and that includes, of course, improving the prospects for a pipeline of antibiotics. But we mustn't forget that there are a number of interventions that need further support beyond antibiotics. We're talking about vaccines, diagnostics, and other things that can be done. There's much more that needs to be done with respect to surveillance and epidemiology to inform actions and make sure that the right things are being done in the right places. So these are areas that Wellcome are very interested to see progressing and for countries to take leadership and ownership of, and that to be done on a worldwide basis. But the other goal that it's already touched on in this is the sustainable pipeline for antibiotics. You've already heard from Professor Thuritzbacher and Dr. Santi that the pipeline for therapeutics is insufficient to meet the world's needs. This is a situation which is clearly leading to a crisis. We already have many people dying throughout the world. You know, the oft-quoted figure, which is very out of date, is 750,000 people a year around the world. We know that's an underestimate. Too many people die every year from drug-resistant infections as a result of AMR. One of the key tools and interventions in this space is, of course, antibiotics. We all know that the pipeline for antibiotics is insufficient. We also know that there are a number of areas where there are problems in bringing that pipeline back to life. So that's something where Wellcome has been focused, is identifying those key friction points and trying to address those, because what we want to see is a stable ecosystem across R&D. We want to see that the fundamental research is done, and when it's done, it can translate into identifying promising candidates, and those candidates can progress, and those that demonstrate efficacy and safety can be utilized in healthcare systems and be useful tools in treating people and saving lives. Now, looking across this piece, there's a lot to be done. There's a lot that we've done so far, CARB-X is an initiative that Wellcome joined in now 5 years ago, and Aaron Duffy's going to speak further about CARB-X. This is a very important piece in providing support financially as well as technically to advance promising candidates of new antibiotics, diagnostics, and vaccines. But it's not everything. There's much more that needs to be done. Wellcome has recently announced that it's joining in the Amr Action Fund, which is a space to support investment and also to provide additional technical support to promising late-stage clinical candidates. This is a very useful tool to bring forward those promising candidates because there's not sufficient funding in this space to carry the drugs through clinical research toward their registration. However, it in itself is not sufficient to meet the needs of the world. There's more work that's required to unlock the ecosystem overall. But what we can't forget is translation is very hard. It's not simply a case of throwing money at the problem to solve it, but there's a lot of work that will need to be done, and it's going to need to be done over a number of years. Looking beyond that translation piece as well, or alongside it, we think there needs to be some improvement in the regulatory science so that we can have innovation and that in terms of how products are brought forward and made available to patients ultimately. And we hope to soon make an announcement with respect to innovation and platforms for clinical research. This is an area where there is insufficient capacity and capabilities to progress those promising candidates. And we think that an increase in capabilities and capacity and use of things such as adaptive trials will help unstick some aspects of the pipeline. So Wellcome is looking at areas where, as I described them, points of friction, that we want to reduce that friction. But the goal here is that we can have a stable ecosystem for R&D, and one that ideally should be sustained and sustainable overall. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Tim. As you said, we have now the opportunity to hear about the CARB-X, and this will be done by Erin Duffy. She's working in this program, which is a non-profit partnership dedicated to the acceleration of new antibacterials. So, Erin.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Professor Canton, JPIAMR, and the UK MRC for the opportunity to participate in this panel. As you heard, CARB-X is a global not-for-profit led by Boston University and funded by the US, the UK, and the German governments, as well as the Wellcome Trust and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Our vision is life-saving innovation to keep the world prepared for dangerous bacterial infections. Our mission then is to accelerate a diverse portfolio of innovative antibacterial products towards clinical development and regulatory approval with funding, expert support, and cross-project initiatives, and I'll describe those in an upcoming slide. We, of course, do focus on the bacteria listed on both the WHO and the CDC priority lists. Some key facts about the portfolio as of yesterday. Since inception, we have funded 84 innovative projects. We have obligated $318 million. We have projects across the globe, including in 11 different countries. Today, our active portfolio, and this is a portfolio across our 3 pillars of treatment, prevention, and diagnostics. We have 55 active programs. 34 of those are treatment or therapeutic programs, and I'll describe those on the next slide. To date, and importantly also, we've had 8 project graduates. A graduate for us in the treatment or prevention space is the successful completion of a first-in-human program, and in the diagnostic space, completion of validation and verification. Our projects do focus on high unmet need, performance characteristics, and I'll describe that, and novelty. And this very much builds on what we heard from Professor Theresbacher in her introductory comments. So when we look at syndromes that our portfolio addresses, you can see here on the left for the direct acting therapeutics, There's an emphasis on lower respiratory tract infections, bloodstream infections, and urinary tract infections, as well as sexually transmitted diseases, skin and wound infections, and complicated intra-abdominal. As you heard earlier, there is a large unmet need in the general area of pneumonia, HAP-VAP, and that is why there's an emphasis there. Certainly, sepsis is a large concern, and we have broad spectrum programs that focus on that. With UTI, of course, a lot of that has to do with doability of clinical trials, but also continued resistance, as Professor Thersbacher underscored. And this is an area where performance characteristics are very important. So for us, that would mean that an agent not only has to have broad spectrum activity, including drug-resistant activity, but also an oral form to have maximal utility. In our non-traditional pipeline of therapeutics, we also have a large emphasis on lower respiratory tract infections. Half of that portfolio is focused there, with the next emphasis on UTI, and you can see wounds, prosthetic joint infections, skin complicated abdominal, and bloodstream infections. When we look at the novelty in these two portfolios or subsections of our treatment pillar, you can see in terms of the direct acting therapeutics, we do have an emphasis on cell wall activity, both in the non-peptide form as well as in the peptide form. I should say in most cases, in fact, in the large majority of cases in our direct acting therapeutics portfolio, these are novel classes and often novel mechanisms of inhibition within these known general mechanisms of action. We do have a couple of programs focused on DNA synthesis, and these are in the novel bacterial topoisomerase arena. We do have programs focused on protein synthesis. These are largely in the area of translation and other areas. We also have fatty acid biosynthesis inhibitors programs, and one truly novel class and novel mechanism of inhibition. In our non-traditional portfolio, we have a heavy emphasis on antivirulence programs, and these span the range of development, including a phase 1 program that's currently being conducted by GlaxoSmithKline targeting FIMH. We have potentiator programs, both non-BLI and a BLI program as well that just graduated the portfolio. We have 2 immune directing programs, 4 protein family-based programs, 2 therapeutic antibodies, and 2 therapeutic phage programs, 1 an engineered program and 1 using phage as a delivery vehicle. So again, a lot of diversity here, a lot of emphasis both on direct acting as well as non-direct acting, often adjuvant, and again, an emphasis on key areas of unmet need. I do want to end, because we've heard this a few times today, and I want to emphasize that CARB-X is a lot more than just the funding. I've been reminded, or in fact, maybe even teased a little bit by Dr. Jenks that, there are many groups who can give out money more effectively than CARB-X, though we do an okay job at that as well. But really where we excel, I believe, is in our acceleration themes. And I'm going to focus on the 2 center points here, which is project-specific acceleration and cross-project opportunities. So once a program comes into portfolio, and as you can see here, the vast majority of our programs in the therapeutics area are with small and medium enterprises. We do have a few academic programs and institutes, but again, the large majority in SMEs. When a project comes into portfolio, we do build a company support team around them. We are very much blessed to have a large subject matter expert pool of about 150 experts across the breadth and depth of areas that are important for discovery and early development. We also have an internal R&D team, and so together we work with the companies to best accelerate their programs forward towards the clinic. In terms of cross-project opportunities, This is something that is a more recent activity initiated by our internal R&D team. And this is to take a step back and say, are there common themes that product developers over and over again are experiencing that really prevent them from unlocking the value and driving towards the clinic? And we have some examples. So we heard a bit earlier today about pools of pre-existing resistance. We've very recently kicked off an initiative working with IHMA to do a large susceptibility study for programs in our therapeutic portfolio, looking at all of the key bacterial species and strains of interest to Carbex, and then asking the question, how robust are these programs in the face of pre-existing resistance? And this will allow us to help them best optimize those programs moving ahead. Another example would be to look at antigenic conservation. This is clearly more important in our non-traditional portfolio as well as our prevention portfolio, but to make sure that, again, our products are addressing the key areas of unmet need and resistance. And this also has a large emphasis on low middle income countries. We also, in concert with the NIAID, are starting to discuss a cross-project opportunity around animal models of infection, which of course are a large challenge for many of our programs. And you heard about that again earlier with Professor Theresbacher. And here, our emphasis is on looking at back translation of products that have been used clinically, with an emphasis on those that have failed for reasons that animal models haven't allowed us to understand. And so to study these molecules in varieties of animal models of infection, to look at the PK and to really get an understanding of where the break is, will allow us, we believe, again, to unlock the value of programs in portfolio that want to address these areas of need for which we've had failures. So with that, again, I'll thank you and very much look forward to the discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Erin, for your presentation. And now we have Laura Marin. She's the Secretariat for the JPI, Antimicrobial Resistance. Laura, you are in your house, as we said.
Thank you, Rafael. So yeah, I'm very glad to be here today with all of you and to host this workshop. And the real idea is to bring together in this panel all the big international initiatives that are contributed in Feeding the Pipeline. So this session now and the next panel is to work together, how we work together with all these other international initiatives in Feeding the Pipeline. So what I'm going to present briefly today is exactly what is the efforts of JPIAMR. JPIAMR funds and support research in the full area, One Health area of antimicrobial resistance. And specifically, I'm going to explain of our portfolio in the area of therapeutics. Our niche in the landscape of the full drug development pipeline of antimicrobials is really the discovery phase, the preclinical, and also to improve the current antimicrobial treatment. So this is the niche of the operations and activities of JPIAMR. In this niche of discovery and preclinical, we support at the moment 21 projects and 8 networks. And the idea here is to complement the national research funding from our 28 member states. Together, the volume of all our members in national investments on AMR research is about 2 billion euros. And from these 2 billion euros, more than 50% is dedicated to therapeutics. In that volume of therapeutics research, most of it is not prioritized. Therefore, what we do at JPIAMR together with the members is to complement those national research programs and to see what it's lacking and how we can push and progress the pipeline. Therefore, our drug discovery portfolio is focused on the WHO priority pathogens list. As you can see in this slide, about most of our funding is directed to projects that are operating in the priority 1 and 2. And from those, the scope of the portfolio is mainly from hit to lead phase. So it's really in this preclinical discovery area. As we can see from our portfolio and our members' portfolio, the discovery pipeline is very diverse. I think Ursula was mentioning before, and there is a lot of interesting and new things that we need to be supporting to be able to have material for clinical development. In this sense, I'm going to have a bit more detail on which type of leads are our project portfolio working. We have a portfolio that is not only dedicated to traditional, but we also have alternative treatments and therapies and methods outlook. So we support both portfolio. We are supporting projects from direct acting molecules and potentiators or enablers, but also in this more therapeutics alternative area of phage, antiviral agents or nanobiotics. So it's like a rich portfolio that we try to see on how to advance. From this portfolio, we can see the first outcomes. I mean, it's very important for us to see as when we are supporting these projects on top of the national projects, to see how is the impact of prioritized research and prioritized funding, and it's important to us to see if this is stimulating the pipeline and if we are getting new interesting elements in the pipeline. We can see from the very first projects that we started to support 4 or 5 years ago, we see some interesting results. Like, for example, from the projects that we've been supporting, this very early one, so this is not all the portfolio, but at the beginning of the portfolio, to have already 6 new preclinical candidates in interesting fields that, especially on those areas that are more lacking, that Ursula was presenting earlier today. But not only that, from that we also have 2 patents filed on beta-lactamase inhibitor and anti-tubercular agents, so also important steps. And to complement these new discoveries, we also have new therapeutic indications. This type of new broad of indications are also interesting and important in the decrease of resistance. And to finalize, to say in here that what we also like to see is how these projects that we are supporting on the discovery area is moving in the pipeline. So which of those are moving more into preclinical and clinical. So we're glad to see that 3 of these projects have received further funding from the colleagues that we have right now in the panel, so from CARBEX, from the European Commission, from TB Alliance, to really continue developing further these new candidates and hopefully to get new molecules. So this is how we work in JPIAMR to support the projects and really try to help the movement and feeding in the pipeline. But as the colleagues in CARBEX were saying before, we are not only funders, and JPIAMR we only support transnational research, but we also support networks of a lot of researchers around the globe. So we support over 1,000 researchers all over to bring new ideas and new collaborations for providing new research projects and new ideas. And we also support capacity building of the community to expand the scientific community in the IMR field by creating a knowledge hub. So we are developing a virtual research institute that we will be launching in a month, a digital platform where we already have a lot of data sets and we already have dashboards with research infrastructures in the field, biobanks, databases, and all about what is data circulation, data sharing is also a key part of the activities that JPIAMR is supporting and that contribute in feeding the pipeline. Thank you.
So thank you, Laura, to present the actions for the JPI. And now we have the opportunity to hear Florence Sejourné. She is working in Double Terra, but his role here is as a president of the Alliance.
Yes, can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you, Florence.
Okay, perfect. And you should see my slide as well?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for giving the opportunity for the BEAM Alliance to be here around that roundtable. So I will introduce the BEAM Alliance and what we do and what we are looking for in the current discussions in the worldwide policy changes. So the BEAM Alliance, in a nutshell, we are regrouping the SMEs, biotech companies from Europe innovating in antimicrobial resistance research. We've been funded in 2016, and we are present in 16 countries in Europe, as well as Israel. We have 72 members, and all together as a group, we are developing more than 130 products. So it definitely has shown by Erin from Carbex, SMEs are the key for driving innovation in Europe, certainly in partnerships with academia. And you know, probably a third of us are spin-off from academic research. But the key of the innovation towards new drug development is there in SMEs in Europe. What we do as an alliance is really to give members a unique voice representing SMEs to propose and support policies and incentives around antimicrobial R&D in Europe and in the One Health perspective. So BEAM is today a key industry stakeholder regarding innovation, innovative AMR product development conducted in Europe. When we look at the WHO preclinical pipeline just presented earlier today, it's very interesting to see that Europe is quite dynamic in terms of innovation. 44% of the preclinical products are developed in Europe, and 83% of them are carried out by SMEs, and which correlates with the 95% support Carbex is supporting through innovation. We have developed and communicated in the past around the vision we had all together as a group of biotechs on BEAM innovation, on AMR innovation, and clearly the future of patients, as we said, as we've heard very often now, is prevention, diagnostics, treatment, and even before, during, and after infections. And we have developed that that scheme showing the 6 ways innovative product could address patient needs. And our first objective is patient needs. What do patient needs and how to handle this? And I think the COVID crisis is really giving explanation to the world on what means prevention, diagnostics, treatment, and prevention of transmission as well, which is the key of infectiology. And all the SMEs of the BEAM Alliance are actually targeting products in the entire scope. And clearly, there are technical challenges ahead of us on all the products we develop, but we have to try to make it. So the BEAM members are there to try and to make sure we move forward our project. Half of the drug developers today are micro companies, like 10 FTEs. We don't have revenues. And clearly, because of the issues of the business models in the field, investors, pharma are not going to re-engage in that field without key policy changes. So the BEAM Alliance is highly motivated to be in touch with all the stakeholders, and we thank JPIAMR and all the activities they've done to support us because we've been moving forward on discussing with regulators regarding new pathways for innovative products, including non-traditionals, in order to define new differentiation criteria needed to demonstrate clinical utility. There are clearly some research to conduct with academic science in order to validate new biomarkers associated to clinical outcome, especially in prevention. And this is a key aspects that we should push as well. And on the other side, we need financial incentives to support market uptake. Otherwise, no new private investors will re-engage next to us, and we will not be able to give it a try to need those new innovative products. So we need new mechanism to be fixed, and the market failure, and in order to attract investment. And as we've heard, Europe is really moving forward there, the US as well. But as we speak, we still need decisions to be taken. So we'll be happy in the next year. I mean, especially this year, 2021, 2022 are key years for those financial incentives to be delivered by policymakers so that we can survive and make sure we can give us a chance for those new products to be on the market one day. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Florence, for your thoughts on that. And now we have the last one, who is Graham Somers, and he is representing GSK and the pharma industry here. So, Graham.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to join this discussion on what's one of the most important topics on the planet. So, just what do I do? So I work for GSK and my official title is IMI Portfolio Director. So as part of that role, I wear many hats across the industry and with public partners. The first is to look after GSK's IMI portfolio. The second is to work with FBA and FBA companies to put projects in place. And I also chair one of the FBA operational groups in IMI 1 and now IMI 2. And also a strategic governance group on infection control with John Lang at Sanofi. So as part of my role, it's more, I guess, operational and practical in terms of setting up projects across IMI 1 and 2. And I think when I came to this role, we started setting up projects in IMI 1 and was part of setting up the New Drugs for Bad Bugs suite of projects, which is a massive undertaking, actually. And there was a number of projects which ran across drug discovery from translocation, looking at uptake transporters in bugs to see how they could be efflux transporters to see how they could be overcome, to enable, which was industry partners working with public partners on drug discovery programs in an industrial setting. So an industrial drug discovery setting, actually partnership, of which there has been phase 1 clinical trial antibiotics come out of that. And also with the New Drugs for Bad Bugs Combat T suite of clinical projects that not only put a massively successful clinical trial platform in place in Europe, but also is instrumental in developing some antibiotics. And now I think the Commission will be supporting that further with ECRAID. So New Drugs for Bad Bugs was incredibly successful in IMI 1. Now in IMI 2, we've moved to the AMR Accelerator. The AMR Accelerator consists of 3 pillars. First of all, we have Combine, which is a pillar that's set up to coordinate the activities of all the other projects, but it also has its own scientific capabilities. And Erin, there is one around animal models and understanding animal models of infection, and also the design of clinical trials and trying to understand the safety and efficacy of heritage projects that have or haven't made it onto the market. Then we have another project called ERA for TB, which is looking at doing drug discovery with public and private partners in TB up to phase 1. And we're currently negotiating a large project to follow up called Unite for TB, hopefully, where we will take molecules and combination regimens through phase 2 in adaptive clinical trials, Tim. So the third pillar of the AMR Accelerator is a series of very small projects designed for partners to work in small consortia to look at early phase drug discovery, actually, and try and move projects through to phase 1. So I think IMI is an incredibly successful project where public and private partners have come together, and specifically in the AMR field. So I'm a real keen believer, actually, of public-private partnership. And I think if COVID has taught us anything, it's what can happen if public and private partners come together quickly, have political support and significant funding to be able to prosecute results and therapies, actually, and getting therapies to the patient. So as part of my role, I see a lot of instruments being put in place and a lot of results coming out. And I guess my challenge to both the panelists and to the participants of this particular conference is sustainability and coordination. So what do I mean by that? So in terms of sustainability, we see a number of instruments in place that are addressing different parts of the drug discovery and development pathway. How do we ensure that there is end-to-end funding in a portfolio approach such that the best molecules will make it to the patient in the quickest way possible? We do also see that some consortia that are incredibly successful, when they come to an end and there isn't a sustainability plan, it's incredibly difficult to sustain the activities of incredibly valuable partnerships. So that would be, again, my challenge to policymakers, is to make sure we ensure sustainability, and then coordination across platforms. So if we have instruments dealing with different parts from drug discovery through phase 1 late clinical development, how do we coordinate the activities of those molecules across the different instruments so they could seamlessly pass from one end of drug discovery to the other? I think those would be my key additions to this conversation. The other, of course, is lack of expertise. So we've already mentioned that many big pharma are dropping out of AMR due to the funding models. Expertise goes with them. Now that will be regenerated in small, medium-sized enterprises with academia, but certainly I have a concern that the expertise around drug discovery could be lost in antibiotics if we're not too careful. So those would be my points to put into this funding pot. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Graham, for your opinion here. And now it's open for discussion. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time to do as you did your presentation, but I would like to start. But if you want to do some questions, you can do also. My first question is for Ursula. Ursula, my opinion here of the pipeline is we have not done our best, or let's say we have done the easiest way just to develop the new antibiotics, because you have put the carbapenemases at the top of the problem, one of the biggest problems, and we have been trying to address this with the beta-lactam inhibitors. So do you think we have done the easiest way to develop the antimicrobials? We have not been very, let's say, or with a lot of initiative with another ones to try to introduce another type of antibiotics. What's your opinion on that, Ursula?
Yes, I think you're right. It was the easiest. I mean, easy sounds a little bit funny because nothing is easy in R&D, but it was the easiest and quickest way of finding a patch to a very specific problem. That helps for a while in certain regions of the world, but it's not a solution to the problem. So we still need new classes, new mode of actions. The most important is that we should not have any pre-existing cross-resistances, because if we have that, then the selection pressure will kick in and it will not be sufficient for long term.
Mm-hmm. So thank you, Ursula. We have some question in the chat. There is one for you here, so I'm going to read this one and try to see if we can understand. The question said, how many antibiotics with clinical unvalidated targets have even entered the clinical pipeline? And also, are there failure trends we can anticipate for the future development and preclinical candidates?
So the first question, I guess, I'm not sure if I understood it correctly, was asking if we have antibiotics entering the clinical stage with not validated targets. I mean, that was the case in the past for most natural products. They were introduced into the clinic and even to the patient even before knowing the exact mode of action. So that was not uncommon in the past. Now it's we have new techniques and much more and better opportunities to characterize mode of action. So it's always good to know how a new antibiotic works. The second question, I don't know anymore.
Well, probably is if we can anticipate for this experience, if we are going to have some trends with this failure, and we can anticipate if we are going to be success with another candidates or not. but I think you have addressed this one. So we can move to another one that I think is very interesting and well taken. And I would like to have your opinions because we don't have a lot of time on that, is related with COVID and vaccines, because this has been developed very quick, very quick. So we have learned that when the academia, the pharma industry, and also the funders put the money and put all the process on that, we have at the end, in a very short period of time, vaccine in this case. So can we expect this with this experience with the new antimicrobials, Ursula?
I think COVID was a great example what can be achieved, but we still have to acknowledge that the technology was available already. You cannot start from the scratch and have a drug in 1 year. So even for vaccines, the technology was there, the partnerships were established already, and then great help of governments and funding and everything together made it possible to have a vaccine in this very short time period. But I think for antibiotics, it's a different story. But still, if we all help together and advance the most promising programs, I think we could achieve a good result, even if it takes longer than a year.
Okay, thank you.
Much longer than a year, much longer.
We have now a question to Alexander, and this is coming from Adam Duan. And the question said, will Alexander be able to elaborate on the development of procurement for new antimicrobials in the European Union, and what might be envisioned under the activity?
Okay, thank you for the question, and a brief answer, not very much, because we have not yet published the work. So, but what I can anticipate is indeed the establishment, we are thinking, and we would like to establish an innovation partnership, a new one for this pool incentive mechanism, which is a novelty. And to do so, we need preparatory work. So what we are planning to do is the work program to be published soon is to call for a coordination and support action, where these are actions not for research, usually are for health, so for representative of member states like health authorities, financial authorities, procurers, to really develop a concept of how to make this new instrument. So this is preparatory work ongoing. Soon there will be the publication so that they can see really, you can see more in detail what is expected, but the work has to start indeed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. There is one question here is related to the IMEI. Is it still focusing on antimicrobial resistance in addition to tuberculosis?
So IMI is still on the make. There are discussions with the council. So at the moment, what you can access is the strategic research agenda, which indeed has been designed, is quite different from the, so the partnership on the make is different from the IMI2 that we had before. So the reason being also that we have different joint undertakings on the make. So we have also the ADCTP3, so the partnership with Sub-Saharan Africa. And there is also on they are on the same level of preparation in the strategic research agenda, the preparation and the focus, let's say, on antimicrobial resistance, which was not there before. Also on the clinical trial work, and on tuberculosis is one of the targets of ADCTP3. So we need to make sure now on this making that we do not overlap, so the same partnership or initiatives are addressing similar things. So there is, at the moment, when you see the strategic research agenda, not the same focus on IMR that IMI2 had. There are other partnerships, like the European Partnership, One Health, IMR, on the preparation. There is a consultation, a collaboration and support action for the preparation of that as well. There are other instruments on the make, and we have to see in this environment how we put the different elements. There is the pool incentive as well on the make. So this is to be followed on the maturity that evolves as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Alexander. I think that we don't have more time for discussion, unfortunately. I think it has been a very nice session. We have been, we have heard different opinions for the academia, for the funders, and also for the pharmaceutical industry, also for the biotech, for the BIM Alliance. And I think as a conclusion, I can say that we have different initiatives. Not all the initiatives has been successful during this time, but we have also opportunities for funding of these new and coming initiatives. And with this conclusion, I think we can close this session. So thank you very much for all of you to be attended here. Thank you.